Hi everyone, I'm Rhona at Ezuma. I'm the founder of Thiiird magazine. We're a print magazine, podcast, and we also run community events. We're a platform that's informed by intersectional feminist theory and also decolonialist thought. And a big thing we try to do is to amplify different underrepresented groups within the creative industries. I'm joined here today by the amazing Larry Achiampong.
Hey, how you doing? Let's go.
So Larry is a multimedia artist that needs no real introduction, but just to sort of launchpad into the questions for today's talk, I wanted to ask you, Larry, about the work of an artist who's exhibiting here today, someone who I'm sure you guys would have seen their work on display coming in through the Turbine Hall, and that's Anatsui's work. Their piece, The Red Moon, the Behind the Red Moon, has obviously been produced for the Tate as part of the Shawanda commission. And I also understand that he's been a major influence for you and your work.
Massively, massively, yep.
I just wanted to ask if you could share your first sort of moments of contact with Anatsui's practice and how that's informed your practice as an artist too.
Yeah, for sure. So, I came across Uncle L's work through like periodicals and journals at Innova, Institute of International Visual Arts, when they're based on Rivington Street, Rivington Place in Shoreditch. And at that point in time, as a younger kind of like aspiring artist studying on BA level, then later MA level, like I was just searching for black artists, both based here and or maybe in Ghana, that were alive, that were doing things, because most of the stuff I've been taught by just white men. So coming across Uncle L's work in the form of journals, it's difficult to tell things like scale, right? But immediately, in terms of the pages that I would be looking at, whether it was like Thiiird text and so on, to me, what really kind of stood out was, and this is really my own thing, but I find that the sculptural like bottle tops, to me, they're like paintings. To me, they're more like paintings than they are sculptural as well, of course. Don't get me wrong, but there's something about the way that movement is captured and your perspective on that aspect of movement or positioning can kind of change, and not too dissimilar from texturing within video games, or the use of not simply pixels but polygons and layerings of those. And so from that point in time, would have been like around 2002, a couple of years or so later, I got wind that he would be showing in major show Africa Remix at the Hayward Gallery. And so, going there, I kind of thought I knew what I was, expecting, but it's kind of the funny thing with seeing an artist's work, whether it's in a journal or online, to IRL, they're two completely different experiences. And I was just so blown away by this kind of like wave of material, of everyday objects that were essentially sewn together and just had this kind of abundance, you know what I mean? Just like really taking on the space. And that kind of really made me reconsider what sculpture could be, or how painting could be explored, or really just how a practitioner perhaps might consider the environment rather than simply just working on just the object. Because as far as I'm concerned, it's, even when you go to the turbine hall, you know, there's certainly a lot of consideration that's been taken in with regards to the gargantuan space. You know, things get swallowed in there. Do you know what I mean? So, yeah.
You mentioned obviously that in El's practice he uses bottle tops. He kind of crushes the caps, doesn't he? And that material is what enables him to build these beautiful structures. And I was thinking, just as a viewer, about like whether we can call his process like a sort of recycling of that material in terms of like, you know, making use of something which we see as waste, or a repurposing of that material in terms of, you know, taking something like a bottle cap and making it serve a different need, or like actually a reappropriation in taking these caps and actually transforming the meaning of them. And I was kind of wondering whether you have a perspective on that as an artist yourself, and then sort of leaning into your own work with the stuff you do, what angle you sort of lean into yourself.
Definitely. I mean, that aspect of being, you know, sustainable, but again, where I take that perspective-wise for myself is being, you know, sustainable through necessity as well. So, you know, having come from a low economic background, and even at a point in time when I was studying whether on BA level at Westminster or then MA level at the Slade, you know, I'm in spaces with people where they have, or they come from, you know, certain aspects of privilege where they got a disposable income to use. Me, I'm jumping into skips all the time. I'm using any kind of like thing every which way and how, and so I was always using objects that people would consider or not consider, and you know they'd be, you know, discarded of sorts. So I think there's also for me the connection as you know, as an African, as a Ghanaian, in you know, the way that my mum's like raised me about, you know, like using things and the multiple uses of things, and also even just the appreciation of that. So when I noticed that, you know, the bottle tops were bottle tops, like that was just like, whoa, like, right, so maybe we can do some stuff with bottles as well. Like I did all kinds of things, just, you know, in I guess in reverence really to Uncle El's work. And no, that plays itself out, you know, to today. I mean, you know, with Copperfield, my gallery that have represented me for nearly 6 years now, we just did my first solo booth at Freeze, and most of the objects there, I mean, second-hand stuff, or, you know, wood that's taken from skips. You know, that's, for me, that's a continual thing. It's what I've done from the beginning. I continue to do. It doesn't matter where I go. This is how we work. But interestingly, which I think also connects with Uncle El's work, I think he said in a interview in the Financial Times, is there's something in the way that when an object is taken or used, there's an energy that's kind of placed that lives in that, you know, which I really believe. And I think that that helps to create a space for viewers, especially people who maybe, you know, don't go to galleries as much, to kind of, you know, have an affinity with the materials. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, I mean, I do that with the physical objects. I do that with filmmaking. So, you know, we were just talking earlier, right, before we started, that with my approach to filmmaking, you know, I have my camera or cameras that I use for the moment in time. At the moment, I'm using a Sony A7S Mark III, which is great for low light, because I hate using lighting when I'm making films. Like, I want to be able to use a machine that can take on an environment without having to, you know, play with the environment itself. I want the camera to be able to interpret that. But, you know, of course, we have to go for funding. We have to apply for funding. But what if we don't get the funding? Or what if we don't have as much funding as we're hoping for? Well, then what do you have then? So, like, for me, every time I do a project, or, you know, there's a payday from a project or something, I'll put a little bit aside, you know, just to kind of build this, I guess, what's turning into a media center, really. But yeah, I try to be sustainable in that approach. Do you know what I mean? And also in helping others. Sometimes I get people asking me if they can use equipment, that kind of thing. So, yeah.
Just touching on your work as well, I know in a lot of your films, like say Wayfinder, the Relic series and such, I feel definitely when I watch it, I feel that like stories about the black community and the black experience are sort of centralized in them. I was just wondering from your perspective, what some of your inspirations are when it comes to creating your works.
Oh gosh, loads. I mean, if we sit with Wayfinder, yeah, one of the central inspirations for that is for me showing respect to black womanhood, showing respect to the people that raised me. You know, even my sister, who is actually a couple of years younger than me, but you know, she's an outgoing person. So the Wanderer character is actually based on her. Even the approach to the style of clothing. You know, I saw her wearing this really cool pair of combat Dr. Martens. I've actually stolen from her style-wise, not size-wise. My feet are bigger than hers. She won't let me get away with saying, like, you know, that my feet are the same size otherwise. But so, you know, she was very much more of an outgoing person. I'm still a bit more kind of like laid back. I don't mind going out every now and again, but I'm more of a homebody. She'll go to shubs, she'll go to the garage events, the, you know, like party nights, happenings, all that kind of thing. And so in making this film, which is kind of considering, you know, exploration of the English landscape and outdoors as well as indoors, you know, because there's a lot to be had about, you know, said about indoors, whether it's, you know, a gallery space or a greasy spoon, like all kinds of different environments that you come across in the UK. There was an importance for me to think about what that means for black women in terms of safety, in terms of equity or the lack thereof, and you know, the multitudes of how that exists, which is why you have, you know, a range of different voices across the other chapters of the film. So yeah, you know, there's that. Class, of course, is a really big thing. Like I said, come from a lower economic household and background, you know, having experienced things like poverty and such. I don't kind of take lightly my position as an artist in the scene. You know, I may have, you know, struggled and worked real hard to get to this point, but it's still a privilege as well, and it's a responsibility of sorts. So that constantly kind of is there in the thought process, and you know, as a parent as well, you know, my kids, they're big inspirations to me as well. They kind of feature somewhat in different ways within my works. My eldest child, Sinai, is 15, is the main character in the Relic Traveller series, you know, and what I love about, you know, being a parent is just the way that, you know, kids over time, like, have their own kinds of mindsets that, you know, you can pick like little connections towards yourself, but then they're also doing their own thing as well. You know, before even coming here, me and Sinai, we were playing a video game called Borderlands, so like it's a kind of like co-op first-person shooter for those of you that may play video games. And I've got a way of playing. Like I like when I play my games, like I'm I'm a hoarder. So I like to, you know, I'll grind and keep on beating weak enemies, and then I'll steal all of their spoils. But Sinai's more of an explorer. He just likes to go around places and just see things. Like, come on, what are you doing, Dad? Like, why do we have to wait here for? And he was similar in that way with when we did the filming for Relic Traveller in Cornwall when we were near Penzance. You know, he just wanted to just play in the fields. I'm like, all right, son, we've got to film that. But yeah, can I play a bit more? Nah, sorry, like we've got to film. So, you know, for me, the inspirations with the practice, they vary and they're quite wide. But, you know, there are particular things that I guess I root myself within.
What about when it comes to installation? I think I saw that Wayfinder was exhibited in a space where there were like church pews and people were invited almost to sit by the church steels and watch the film. I just thought that was amazing. Oh,
yeah. So we've got the, what is it? It's the God's Country kind of sculptural installation that is in the show, which is still at Baltic at the moment, but only for a couple of days now. It finishes on Sunday. Sunday's the last day. It started off touring with Turner Contemporary last year, followed by MK Gallery Milton Keynes. And during the lockdown, I came up with this elaborate kind of idea to create seating that was modelled on, the British Isles, and I was thinking very much about the way in which the UK has become quite fractured more than ever, whether it's talking about Brexit or talking about the cost of living, the haves and the have-nots across communities and things. But I wanted to create a space for that conversation to be like, a literal, but then also a metaphorical thing. So, yeah, where'd I go in my memory? I started thinking about, for some reason, I don't know if, for those of you, if you watch TV or used to watch TV, I think it's like Good Morning Britain or This Morning, like the television kind of show in the mornings. God, am I showing my age? So, like, I think that there'd be the weather guy, I forget his name, but like they filmed it. It was live, I think in Liverpool actually, pretty much where Tate Liverpool is, and like the guy would jump across like different pieces of land that made up the British Isles, and I thought, oh, like what if you can actually sit on it, But we also have like backrests and things and cushions that are, have similar colours of landscape, that kind of thing, and it just becomes an actual active thing. You're participating, you're implicated, you're part of it. Do you know what I mean? In a way that, although different to, slogans of the Conservatives saying, "Oh, we're all in this together." It's like, what? Like, you saying that while you're in your chopper or while you're in a, your nice little condo wherever. So, you have environments like that where the experience of the wayfinder film, I think, becomes a bit more of a physical, material one in comparison to the cinematic environment that, the film was additionally made for, where it was, released last year and had a limited run. And then, you have other ideas of mine, like, the gaming room, which is something of a, recurring kind of like ongoing thing, where I'm on somewhat of a quest to explore play, the importance of play, but also the weirdness, I think, that people have in relation to play. If you take time to play or to chill out, to relax, like, you're not being serious about things, And then also, furthermore, an interesting thing for me with gaming, I'm old enough to know in the art scene when I was studying that gaming was frowned upon. It was, you were ostracized if you're into games. You're not serious about life or stuff like that. But games they're incredible. In very much in a way that literature can kind of whisk you off to different environments, or the music can evoke certain feelings. So with my gaming rooms, sometimes I'll place my artworks within them. Sometimes I just won't even. The focus is just, it's the games as research, but I don't mean it in that kind of boring sense of like, which is what we do in the art scene. We take an object and we strip it of everything, and then you're just there to behold it. No, you're there to play the game. How does it feel? All right, look, you ain't played it for ages. You ain't played it. So what if you ain't played a game before? Like, you can play it now. You know what I mean? Spend time, take time. So, that for me, that's what the work is about knowing and also not knowing. If you don't know, or, I'm talking about some really heavy stuff because I do go there with my work, that's okay as well,
I love that feeling that the work is about knowing, but also not knowing, right? Because I think that's what a reference is to some degree. It's like something that you use which might symbolize to certain people like a message, but for other people it might be a completely new experience. It might be the first time they're encountering it. They might not be able to understand the reference. And I really love the fact that you do that with gaming, because I agree with you. There definitely was a time where, you think about people being gamers and it'd be like, you you know, you stay at home all the time and you're on
Just
your Game
indoors,
Boy,
just
that sort of
making a
thing.
stink.
But I love how in your work as well, like you've really underscored the artistry in gaming. And I think also on your website, like you have mixtapes with like, you know, collections of sounds and music that has come from games. And I think when you listen to that, like as an experience, you realize how, you know, that format is an actual art form in itself.
Oh, for sure. There's just so much going on there. Like, you know, again, like the other day, I took my son to, the Sonic, the video game character Sonic Hedgehog Orchestra, you know, Baltic. It was freaking awesome. And what I really loved about it was, like, so for him, like, Sinai is more into, like, some of the, no, he does, sorry, Sinai, if you're here, they're running late tonight, but I'm into more of the older games, so, like, you know, like Sonic 1, Sonic 2, Sonic 3, probably through to Sonic Knuckles. I think when it comes to the 3D games, you know, Sega kind of fell a bit apart with that. But he loves those as well. He does love the older ones, but there was just such a beauty in like seeing him kind of like, you know, go along with the rhythms and the harmonics and just even singing along to certain lyrics and things and collectively with like a whole audience of gamers, people who played the same thing and they're just singing together. You'd think that, you know, they all knew each other. Like everyone is just like getting into it, just like, oh, this is beautiful. Do you know what I mean? So I think, you know, there is true artistry across the board with gaming, from writing through to, you know, concept design. There's so much, you know, even when creating what is referred to as like a vertical slice, or, you know, like a demo of what the game, you know, might be like. It's a incredible phenomenon that you know, I owe a lot of, you know, what I do to that form.
Talking about another one of your films, Expulsion, I got the sense that that film was slightly autobiographical. So if you could talk a tiny bit about what it was about, and also why you wanted to share that sort of story.
Yeah. So the Expulsion is a 2019 film that was supported by the Gallowgate artist-run organisation in Glasgow in Scotland. And the film, like you mentioned, centres on my collective experience with my siblings and my mum, our experience of doing cleaning jobs. So like working environments like this, or you know, free meals studios, which incidentally happened to house the very first Big Brother production. So, you know, those decades ago, the fourth wall, as it were, was like just destroyed for me. So, you know, while people are talking about, you know, all the juicy gossip like Big Brother and that, I'm just like, we're just cleaning across these rooms, and you can see people that can't see us, just, you know, cleaning on sets of Bad Girls, London's Burning, and then right through to like offices and things like that. But like, you know, cleaning jobs, they're monotonous. It's the same thing, you're doing it every single day. And the approach to the making of the film, actually, for me, I was thinking about making a horror film, but not in a kind of literal sense of, you know, having direct physical violence kind of take place, but really different types of violence at the expense of the people who sanctify spaces that others will be using in the daytime, you know. So it's this kind of conversation about the twilight. And for those of you who do play games or Legend of Zelda, there's a reference to that, this idea of the twilight space, the underworld. So, you know, the work is very slow, it's very grainy, it's very raw. The treatment of the visual image is not as kind, perhaps, as the approach to other films that I've made, whether it's Wayfinder or it's the various Relic Traveller films. There's noise. You see that there's a bit of grain in there as well. Again, these kinds of things are done on purpose, and at points in time, you see different aunties that are, you know, cleaning some of these environments and such. And, you know, the other reason I think, you know, why I considered or thought about the film as a horror, or even the approach to kind of like filming and using light or lack thereof, was I used to get really scared, like cleaning these spaces. You know, sometimes like my mum might be in an office, like on a floor or two above, and she's like, "All right, go and get the Henry Hoover or whatever." Oh, go, what, me? Yeah, go and get it. You gotta turn on the lights and stuff, but like, you know, my imagination goes like crazy. So like, I make objects and, you know, all kinds of things out of stuff in the dark, and I'm just like, get through. You know, so that's it's, you know, the film. It's probably not talking about things in that way, in a kind of hilarious kind of tone. Yeah, a bit more kind of, in a bit more kind of like of a Baroque nature, shall we say. And then as far as, again, there's an installational element similar to some films that I create, but in this case you have these swivel chairs, which, you know, you just see in so many of these places, just the typical kind of, you know, swivel chairs that are in meeting rooms and such, with the weird kinds of, you know, tall plants. And then the Henry Hoovers, which are, you know, they're such a British staple. I think they're shit, excuse my language, but I think they're shit Hoovers, though. They're terrible. Like, they're just, you know, they look interesting, but they don't work well. But, you know, every time, again, going to these different environments, I would see these Henry Hoovers, and they were, for me, they're equivalent of someone who doesn't like the look of, but sees clowns all the time. You know, you've got like the weird kind of smirk or grimace and stuff. So, you know, seeing that at the end of a corridor is not, you know, my idea of a good time. So I thought, what better way to explore that than to give it to you, the audience. But yeah, that's in a nutshell some of what takes place with the work.
And your work also has so many different formats, right? So you've mentioned the films, but you also have done paintings, you have done photographs, used photography, we mentioned the installations and stuff like that. When it comes to approaching new formats, what are some of the challenges you faced, and how have you overcome that?
Yeah, I think with new formats is the taking the time to respect the form, the material, the approach to it. You know, so sound, for example. You know, I spent years learning beat making. You know, not through a kind of like vocational thing. I didn't go to an institution. You know, my brother, at the time we were younger, like he'd get CDs from the CD person in Roman Road Market, like almost every weekend. Like he'd have £8 or a tenner, and he'd give it to me, and I'd go and get the CD, or he'd go and get the CD, and you know, we'd listen to the likes of Nas through to Mobb Deep, DMX, all kinds of stuff. And my brother was really interested in the lyrics. He was always talking about the lyrics, and I loved the lyrics, but for me it was really just everything that sculpted the audible space, particularly the beat making itself, from the bass, the lower octaves to the higher ones. So, you know, during my time at the Slade, when I got my bursary, which allowed me to be on the course in the first place, very first thing that I did was I went to Virgin Megastore off of Tottenham Court Road at the time, bought myself an NPC. I had no idea how to use the goddamn thing. But I put a good chunk of that money on it, and I remember getting the instruction booklet for it. It's like a Bible. It's so freaking thick, and you know, fortunately at that point in time, the internet, you know, people are creating forums across the board, and there were people who creating like forums about, you know, beat making and things like that, and that allowed me to like talk with people like around the planet and so on. So, you know, to cut a long story short, it took me a good amount of time to explore this form and respect it and respond with my practice to kind of like develop and open up a voice. So, you know, if I don't know much about something but I want to explore it, I have to spend time with it. You know, a new project in the works at the moment is a video game, which is going to take on and use my Relic Traveller IP. but that's going to take years. And I know it's going to take years. I'm fine with that. You know, I'm not in a rush. It's, you know, forget that. We're there for the long haul. So it's about taking time with the material, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't work, and if that needs even more time, doing that. But also especially having conversations with other people, other human beings, just seeing how other people, you know, approach things. At the moment, I'm working with a producer. His name's Thomas Whitehead. He's a writer and journalist for video games, but also, you know, helps to develop indie games as well. So, you know, I'm not seeing this as like, oh yeah, you know, I'd love to work with an Activision or a Microsoft or whatever. No, I want to do it in the same way that I do, you know, with my films. I want to do it, you know, my or our way, the way that the team kind of like evolves with that. But yeah, for me, it's about spending time and taking time and making mistakes, making loads of mistakes, and just kind of being all right with that, and building that confidence to the point where you're like, all right, yeah, it's ready now. Because I made hundreds of beats, like probably going into the thousands. There's loads of stuff I wouldn't play to anyone, but, you know, creating beats amongst other people who lived in other parts of the world. We were part of a group called the Weekly Beat Sessions, where, you know, a sample would be given to the group members, and you had a week to make a beat. You know, that was my own kind of university, which was just great, you know, because I didn't have someone telling me, oh, you got to do things this way or that way. You just go around, you play around with stuff, and everyone comes back with a totally different response to the same sound, you know. And to me, that's one of the ultimate places of creating art, or contemporary art, as it were.
Yeah, sound definitely feels like a space I think you love to explore. I think I've been told that we have time. We've sort of got to wrap up. So just to ask, are there any questions for the audience that I should pass around? Obviously, I feel like I've been hogging the mic for quite a long time, so. Cool. Do we have time for one more question? Okay, cool.
Sorry, I've been talking for a bit. My apologies. Well, I'm kind of here for that, so yeah, not sorry.
Thank you so much, Larry. It's been lovely hearing from you. So just thank you so much. Thank you all.
Good job. Good job. Hold it close. So like, is that too loud? Or is it better like that? Okay. Close is better. Okay.
How close? This close.
Oh, it's next to me. Sorry. Sitting on it.
I'm number 3.
Number 3, and I am 4.
Oh, I'm 1.
At 4. The magic number.
I've got number 1.
Oh, love that. I've got one that doesn't turn on.
It said number 4, didn't it?
And that should be.
There we go. Thank you very. Oh, hello.
Hello.
Hello, everybody. Hello,
We're
Wembley.
not going to be able to see the images.
I can see the image. Do you want to swap seats? If you prefer, yeah.
Oh, this is beautiful.
Actually, then with the... Okay.
Okay, yeah,
Hello?
that makes sense.
Hello?
Yeah, 'cause
Fabulous.
I think if you're more comfortable like that.
Yeah, because I can see the
Yeah.
images. Can you see the images?
I can see them from the corner of my eye, but I have good
Peripheral vision.
Yeah.
So cute.
I would love some still water, please.
Yeah, I'd love some
Still
extra
would be
water.
lovely.
Thank you.
This is one of my favorite pieces as well. They're just so epic.
Uh-huh.
Oh yeah, if I actually keep this up, then I can have an eye on the time. light is so... It's getting warm. We've all got scarves on. I've draped mine because I thought, let me be part of the gang. Give us a kick if you want us to. Are they? They're excited. I can feel it. I mean, it's just they're letting you know there's a new time frame here, time schedule here, and it's not yours anymore. Your time, not yours. Okay. Ooh. Hello and good evening. Thank you, everybody, for joining us here tonight. Welcome. I'm so excited for tonight's art chat. It's an intergenerational one. We have 3 generations represented here and 2 fantastic artists that I'm so excited to talk with, actually. There will be questions at the end, like 5 minutes or so. Normally people are shy, is what they say. But I know that you guys are better than that. So when that time rolls around, get that hand up. There'll be 5 minutes at the end. But first, let me just introduce these 2 luminaries next to me. First off, we have Sokari Douglas-Camp, who's an internationally renowned artist who has had over 40 solo shows. Whoa. Major, exactly. And primarily working with steel, her work is in the permanent collections of several institutions, including the Smithsonian and the British Museum, and deals with the socio-political ramifications of colonialism and its effects on the environment, and with works such as All the World is Now Richer, which commemorates the abolition of slavery and salutes its survivors, and the Epic, supported by Africa and America, which is an incredible sculpture. Is it still at the V&A? Can we still see it? No. It was at the V&A. If you caught it, you caught it. If you didn't, I'm sorry about that. But it's a sensational work. They're addressing the legacy of slavery and inequality, and touches on issues of power and gender, and of course the climate, and the climate crisis. And next we have Ibiye Camp, another sensational artist, Sokari's wonderful daughter, who investigates technology in the built environment. Ibiye's practice uses architectural tools to create films, augmented reality, and 3D objects. Her past projects in Sierra Leone and Nigeria and Ethiopia investigate the dynamics of technology as a means to explore the glitches and tensions between digital infrastructure and the landscapes. Ibiye works across multiple mediums and is fantastic. I myself, too am an artist and a broadcaster. I am currently working in textile and film, lots of experiments happening, and I'm interested in knowledge exchange and kind of alternative methods of transmission, and adornment is very important to me, and how we find agency through the things we put on our body. And I have a show on NTS called Palm Wine Club. So that's that. Actually, what I was planning to do was ask you to talk a bit about your practice, because I was like, I always find reading out kind of artist bios at the beginning of talks so stiff, and so kind of just like you know, just a bit stuffy and stiff. So I wanted to ask you to quickly to open this discussion. 2 things, kind of to talk about your practice, but also how do you feel about putting your practice into words? Because you both deal, you know, with so many things.
Yes. Oh.
Exactly.
My practice into words. It's difficult to talk about, isn't it? Very difficult. But by describing myself, I think I sort of describe the work. Mm-hmm. And I'm a welder, and I work with sheet steel, and all sorts of topics come up in one's life that you can put into your work. So this image here is about the Niger Delta, and so is this. And this is a portrait of myself. Normally an African woman would be in buba and wrapper like you, but in that last image I was in my overalls, and I was holding up a container full of oil bought on the Wally Road from a Shell station, and there was a picture of a station in the Niger Delta that flares oil, and that was a description of my heritage and myself as an artist. So we have visual words, don't we?
Yes.
As artists. So that's my introduction.
Yes. And Ibiye, how do you feel about putting your practice into words and describe, like, the language around your practice?
Yeah, I see myself as an artist who explores the architecture of spaces, and I guess a lot of my work is very site-specific, and maybe that is something that comes from trying to find identity, particularly in London or Nigeria, Sierra Leone or something. So I think, yeah, I'm a site-specific experimental artist, and yeah, I think it can kind of transform into various different mediums because of that exploration of material. Yeah.
Wonderful, thank you so much. So behind us, Ibiye has wonderfully made 3 videos for this chat, and the first video is primarily showing Sokari's work. Can we pause this one? I wanted you to actually, I'm just saying pause because I wanted you to continue talking about this work and dealing with what's happening in the Niger Delta and the oil.
Okay, this is very simply about, carrying a load on one's head, and in West Africa that is one of the ways of carrying stuff, not on your back here, like carrying rucksacks. Everyone seems to have rucksacks here, but you can carry stuff on your head, and I decided that these containers that would normally have fuel, petrol in or something that people would carry on their heads were the right objects to put acetate film of fire, because of the flow stations in the delta that have fire. And these fires that are in the Niger Delta spoil the ozone in Australia. And so I felt that I had to make this picture of what was going on. And that's all these heads are. I mean, you'd normally have a sort of torso, Greek torso in one of these fantastic galleries that just shows you a beautiful face or something. But I think both Ibiye and I love using lots of different materials. You more than me. And my materials here are fuel and acetate and glass and welded steel. And I'm describing a way of getting around and a practice in West Africa. And that's what these are.
Thank you. I actually think I want to segue onto talking about materials and materiality, and where just the use of materials in both of your respective practices and what's informed, you know, whether it's repurposing things and recycling, or in your case, you know, you're dealing with digital material and data and glitches. Just, yeah. Okay, can we pause this actually? Let's actually get literal. Let's talk about material in terms of cloth, because that's definitely something you've both represented in your work. And this is a cloth that relates to your Kalabari heritage. Could you tell me about this cloth?
This cloth is called Injiri, and it's a cloth that is made in Madras. That's the thing about people in the world, is that we have materials that we claim as our own. You know, like the British claim tea, and tea doesn't grow here. We claim this Madras material, and it's made in India. And people, the Kalabari people, which is what I am, pull out threads, and you illustrated this by actually pulling threads out, and
which represents the kind of gaps, like
gaps,
and almost like windows in the fabric.
Yeah, and sometimes you can pull out so much that you can make lettering in the fabric. And you did a piece in Spain.
No, in Shanghai.
Shanghai.
Yeah, sorry. But this, the process is called pelete bite, which translates to cut thread in Kalabari. And often it's a way of creating a new condition to the textile. And I think that's also kind of like this kind of experimentation or kind of reclaiming process that we were talking about of the fabric, is that you kind of have this plaid cloth,
Yes.
and then you can, a lot of traditional pelete bite experts would kind of pull thread to make symbols of water spirits and various different symbols of the Niger Delta in this cloth. And I think the cloth actually is quite remarkable in metal, because it still has this kind of new condition to the metal, which you're creating in these pieces, but it's also kind of soft but hard
This is
as
it.
well.
In terms of, I mean, there's so much that this evokes for me, whether it is, you know, this thing of platforming your heritage and kind of sharing the meaning. And before the talk started, you asked me what my name meant, and I was like, oh, maybe we should, like that, you know, we could all talk about what our names mean. And then I quickly heard my mother's voice. She's quite sort of superstitious, like a typical Nigerian mother, I'd say. And she is quite hesitant. There's sort of things that, there's lots of things she's taught me about my culture. I'm from a tribe also in the Niger Delta, but a bit to the west. I'm from Isoko. But those things are like sort of secrets to me. There's many things that my mum tells me about my heritage and things that she kind of imparts into me that have strengthened me and made me who I am, but they're secret, very much so. And any time it's a bit like, I don't know if you got this growing up, but when you go to your auntie's house and they offer you like a biscuit or crisp, and you get the look that's like, even though you want that digestive more than life itself, you've got to say, no, thank you, auntie. And I would get that look when people would ask me certain questions about the significance of things, whether it was my name or something that she'd told me. And so I just was curious about do you feel this tension in terms of sharing your heritage and these traditions and the symbols and stuff? Do you ever feel like you're giving away some secret cheat codes, or, like this need for secrecy and the balance of that?
Well, that's quite amazing, because I know in Mum's work previously, you wouldn't show faces. It was more like the kind of the fragments of the kind of arms and kind of the clothing, but actually the face was never revealed, and that's kind of also superstition of Kalabari culture.
Yeah.
Tell us more about that.
Well, people sort of believe that if you make something too realistic, you bring things to life, which is, straight out from, the Renaissance times when people wanted to create life. But in the Delta, they felt that these things would actually get up and walk around and cause havoc. So they made them as stiff as possible. And then, I guess a lot of Western artists came across this stiffness and cubist quality to kind of African pieces and decided that that could be a style. But I decided my style was not to make faces because I felt that that was just too close to the real thing. But it added extra element in that you felt as if you could, as a viewer, be in the structures that I made, and that made me happy.
Yeah.
But I don't know whether anybody else got the
yeah, and you sort of feel that with this series of like women that you've done, particularly with the mothers and the prams and stuff.
Yeah.
It's like for me, they kind of represented a kind of new universal, because they felt like what the universal kind of look of mothers. We're not often seeing black women kind of going about everyday life. It was still dealing with like asymmetry of representation, let's call it that. But there's something about these sculptures that I feel like everyone can look at themselves and see themselves in those women. And it just, they're just something in their everydayness. It's like, these are African women. It's like the aunties I grew up with. There's something very familiar to these works, that it's not just because I'm Nigerian. I feel that anyone looking at them there's something recognizable there or universal. Should we keep the video moving? And also, actually,
it's
Ibiye's work.
Yeah.
Well, no, just apt, because in terms of privacy and secrecy, this body of work is from Data Mining 2.0, the new black gold.
Yeah.
And
black gold.
Tell us a bit about that project, and I will tell you why I feel this is the perfect segue, because it touches on a lot.
So data
These
black
absences.
Gold, it definitely has kind of like this voided space, which your work kind of allows this voided space in order to kind of imagine what was there or maybe what hasn't been seen. And with the way that I work with scanning software, and I work with it in a very kind of rudimentary, informal way. And actually, kind of working in this way in very busy spaces, you create scans or you create models from scans which kind of become glitched, become kind of like have an absence of information, because in order to create a perfect scan, you want to kind of scan St. Paul's Cathedral, something that kind of captures a light in a particular way. But scanning within a market, which is kind of very kind of contrasted lighting, moving kind of okadas and omolekes and all this kind of thing, it creates something that is kind of voidant and glitched. And so I see these spaces as spaces of resistance.
Yes.
And that's one of the things, is that the scan kind of highlights what the technology doesn't pick up, but it also allows space to maybe reimagine that type of technology or...
Absolutely. And also, both of your works are dealing with like extraction of kind of commodities and the inequality that creates, because the whether it's the people or the lands that these commodities come from, they don't, like the people of the Niger Delta, we know full well that they are not benefiting from the excessive extreme wealth generated by the natural resource on their homeland. And the same thing with data, we are all the commodity now. We've become the commodity. Congratulations, everybody. But for the most part, we're not benefiting. So this idea of kind of withholding or something not being captured, there feels like a sort of resistance to that. And it's a kind of privacy which feels...
we were kind of talking about, like a lot of people, like maybe not the most recent iPhones, but the iPhones before couldn't really unlock facial recognition for many people of color kind of thing. And obviously that's a very annoying thing, but it's also like amazing, powerful thing of like kind of moments of not to be seen, or I don't know. There's many pros and a lot of terrifying cons about it, of like misidentity, but the idea of resistance is...
and ownership of data. I feel like that's what this project touches on also.
Yeah.
How do you feel that we can kind of wrestle back agency? Because data mining is it's frightening to me. And for me, often my response is to kind of opt out. Like I'm just going to delete Instagram for months on end because I just don't want to share.
I have no idea, if I'm honest, but I just love the idea of rethinking visual language.
Yes.
And like, I really enjoy like voids and spaces to rethink kind of ways of being. And I think, particularly with digital technology, I like to question representation. And I think what we were talking about before as well is, you know, using welding, but using welding as like to create textures that look soft and light, and then using kind of game engines to kind of create something that is a low resolution, or like, you know, let's question what these tools are and why would we kind of want to follow like a kind of Western ideal of that.
Yeah,
I kind of want to...
Which touches on something that we've talked about both times that we've met, which is this idea of kind of values and aesthetic values. And, you know, I was talking about my mum, who she is like the queen of just invention and DIY, whether it's like mending things in her own kind of way. You know, she can repair locks, she will make these kind of contraptions to store things at home. And she's also a very talented seamstress and maker. And while they might not look, you know, seamless, whether it, in terms of her DIY, is definitely not seamless, it's very makeshift looking, it works and it's kind of cool looking to me. Yeah. And we touched on this thing of like, who's kind of, what informs our aesthetic values, and, you know, whether it's, even in terms of your website, Ibiye, it's like this smorgasbord. It's not easy, but it's really interesting. It's like you kind of have to work to find things out. It leads you on a journey, and I think it was really refreshing to me to have to go on a journey to find information, rather, because we're used to this kind of very extractive screen grab culture, like, you know, easily absorbable. I can just see it at a glance and take it. So yeah, I just wondered how you feel about kind of challenging aesthetic conventions in the West.
How did you know that you could print these glitches that you put on the screen?
Just, you know, 3D printing, which is like, yeah, but also, it was also an experiment to 3D print because, again, they probably won't stand, or it might kind of, the machine might malfunction because it's not a kind of a complete form. What was the question again?
Just about challenging kind of aesthetic.
Yeah.
Oh, wonderful. Well, actually, it's good because I was going to ask you if you had questions for each other. So that's yours. Tick. Homework done.
Oh, well done.
Do you know what? I think we don't have much time, and I have something very special on the table, guys, which is a really amazing book that is just hot off the presses. It's a new book surveying Sokari's work called Sensational Steel. And yes, it will be available for purchase after. Thank you. Directly from Sokari, or you can get it on that big online retailer that we don't like to mention. But one of the things, when you were telling me about this, when you gave me the book and we were talking about it, you mentioned that actually Ibiye designed the cover as well. Let's make some noise for that. That you, in kind of going through the book, you learned something about your mum's practice that you didn't realise. It was new to you. Yeah.
So, just that you worked with other materials. I think that was one of the main things. And we were discussing how you worked with sawdust. Yes. And that was your main practice. And particularly before 1985, yes, you were predominantly working with carving and sawdust and painting
And
and
fabric.
performance. And yeah, it was really quite reassuring for me actually to see that, because I really obviously admire your practice, but it was just, I could see myself as this kind of finding my way through various different materials, and it's nice to see that you were doing this too. And then also the introduction to faces that came in 1996.
Yeah.
Again, it's like another kind of evolution. And even with your work now, colour is something that's been introduced even more so to your work, particularly since Formentera pieces.
Yeah.
And why was that reassuring to you? Because I think that's something kind of interesting about this thing of being a multidisciplinary artist, you know, today.
Yeah, I guess just again having your language, your visual language, how you kind of navigate as an artist without words, how you can transmit certain information. So you all my life you've done that in a fantastic way. So it was great to see that you before were finding your roots as well.
Yeah, because I think there can be this thing of like, there kind of a pressure to kind of have one discipline or one medium, and most of the work that we know of yours is metal, these amazing steel sculptures that are like larger than life, and like you said, you have such a strong visual like signature throughout your work in these sculptures. And if you work across different mediums, I think can it feel like, do you feel a sort of pressure to kind of have these hallmarks? Or
Yeah, it's something that I'm still grappling with, I guess, and I don't know what the answer will be, but I'm keeping going with the experiments.
Well, I hope to experiment too.
yes,
Still
tell us.
experimenting as well.
I'm still experimenting.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's very recognizable as
Yes.
Sokari type
Yes.
of work.
Yes, well, why not?
But the thing of this having is kind of, you had there's a multidisciplinary aspect to your practice over like from its inception. I'm wondering how, like, in what ways has your mother's practice influenced your practice as an artist?
Gosh, like
Yeah.
so much. I can't even, just from East Street Market, from like the pram pieces, because before we selected some pieces each that we wanted to include in the slides, and all of the pieces which you mentioned of like kind of without the faces, and where everyone could identify with these like pram representations of mothers and
Urban life.
yeah, it's just like, but these were like, growing up just off East Street Market, I think is the way that you responded to East Street is also the way that I kind of figured out how to talk about certain types of ways of living, ideas around diaspora, maintaining culture, and also interacting with, Bangladesh kind of fabric, and then, kind of Iraq kind of vegetable stall vendors, and just this whole kind of idea of London. So the way that you practiced in this way, and also conversations of oil extraction, but also how to kind of talk about this in identifying with homeland, and so much, everything. I feel as though your work is rippling into my work all the time. Yeah.
That's beautiful. Is the ripple going the other way, Sokari? Like, in which ways are you influenced or inspired by Ibiye's work?
She tries to kind of make sure that I pay attention to what I could do. Yes, I because you can get quite complacent if you're comfortable with just having a conversation almost with yourself. But yes, and Ibiye recently made a 3D model of one of my sculptures, and that was quite shocking, because I didn't realise that someone else could do that because it looked so like a metal piece, but it was made out of some peculiar ceramic material that looked like metal. So there's umpteen options for me out there. Possibilities.
How beautiful. I'm going to open it up to questions. Is anybody... Yes, at the front. Hello, Riaz. Do we have a roving mic? We do. Someone's coming over. I know you're very good at projecting.
Hello. Oh my God.
I told you.
Sorry. So yeah, it was amazing. What you mentioned about like the facial, this superstition and facial. If I can like orate myself clearly, like you both deal in your forms, like both digital sculpture. I notice it's like about the material as it is as much about like the subtraction of material in space. And I just wondered, it feels like the complete antithesis of like AI at the moment, like ChatGPT Mid-Journey that seeks to like make a holistic form of human like life. And it's all about it being a completely holistic form and shape. And I just wondered how you're engaging with those technologies and your opinions of them.
Yeah, that's... I'm very interested in AI hallucinations at the moment, and they describe AI hallucination as when a AI kind of system hasn't followed what the human input would have been, and the output is described as a hallucination. And so again, it's like something very machine, but then you would describe a hallucination as a very human kind of attribute or kind of action. And so yeah, I'm very curious with that when it comes to kind of using technology. But what I believe is that within the kind of absence of information, it's kind of like just like abstract art. You see what isn't there, and you can interpret what isn't there, and you can question what isn't there. And I find kind of totality quite terrifying. So,
Same.
Yeah, so these...
Oppressive,
yeah.
I'd say, yeah.
So I think, yeah, there's a kind of really exciting...
It's interesting because the same way Sokari mentioned that you kind of cloned her work. It's like AI, someone like with a laptop and like...
Yeah.
You could probably do the same thing as well. Like, so you could even do it like yourself to your own work.
Yeah, it is really scary, and it's also kind of... I don't know if it's pro or con or, but I think it's great to engage with these technologies, but also to continue in kind of like deconstructing them and also working against them a little bit as well.
Yeah. And I think in terms of your sculpture and the stories you tell through that and the spaces and stuff, I think you also capture this idea of the things that can't be captured or can't be fully quantified. That's what I get from the spaces, in your sculptures, the metalwork, whether it's the lattices in the fabric. It leaves room, I think, because I too am terrified by things that are too concrete. Yeah. That's essential.
Also, like, even though I made this 3D scan of Mum's work,
which you said was scary.
Yeah, it didn't. But it also flattened certain aspects of the work, because obviously steel has purple, like turquoise, all of these wonderful colours. Which is also, you use steel to also kind of discuss kind of people of colour's skin as well. And so when we 3D printed it, and we printed it with this kind of plaster kind of, so it was also printing a representation of the colour, and it did have like elements of the turquoise and the purple, but it didn't have the reflectiveness where Mum's work is also quite site specific, where it can kind of rebound light in a particular way. It can rust, which is really, like, I find exciting because it's almost ephemeral as well. So, yeah, like, the 3D printing, also, I don't think as a sculptor you need to be too worried about it because it can't do what you do.
So, isn't that kind of reassuring, actually?
It is reassuring, yes. But that is the thing about Ibiye's work, is that she's working with a tool that's almost is like another material. Your AI work is like another material. It's like metal or paint, and you're just using this stuff in a totally different way, just like that.
Talk to us about this Ibiye, actually, which is like the kind of merging of, of
I-
both your practices. you
Yeah, I
made
just
for us
wanted
today.
to. I just wanted to do something this week.
Outrageous.
Yeah. So merging, it's a scan of town in Sierra Leone, in Freetown, and then I think it's quite interesting because it's a car that's at the forefront, and like a lot of the cars in Freetown are almost like arts of piece of arts, because they're
Ancient
Yeah.
pieces.
no, because they're kind of sewn together and maintained in quite beautiful ways, and then it kind of merges into Mum's piece of All the World is Now Richer kind of statue. So it was just more of a comment on, Mum's
Sewing things together,
Yeah.
just welding things together.
yeah.
I think we've got time for one more question, actually. Time has really flown. Does anybody else have a question? I saw more than one hand go up. One here. Perfect.
Thank you. And this is so beautiful to watch. You don't always get to see a mother and a daughter speak about their art, so thank you. And my question was, I'm curious as, artists, if you've ever had, or maybe do have, I don't know. I guess not for you since you were making art this week, but had almost a battle that stopped you from making art, or taking a pause, or thinking about, what you've been doing and either reflecting on that. But yeah, I'm kind of just curious on anything that stopped you from your output and what that looked like and how you overcame it.
Okay. I feel as though a lot of the time I get carried away with just the theory of things, I guess. That for me is a stunting experience at times. And then when I allow space for pure experimentation, when I'm not thinking about the context and theory of things, maybe when I'm maybe even like maybe ethically kind of clumsy with the way I'm working, actually that's when I am less judgmental. And I don't know, I feel as though watching Mum, you always had such a wonderful kind of routine and playfulness within the studio. You almost, Mum almost, I would say you almost treat the studio as if it's like a gym or like an exercise space, because it's so physical. Whereas my work is like very much on the computer, or like going to sites and things like that. And so I'm envious a lot of the time of how physical and how like, it can be more of a physical expression rather than, of course there's a lot of theory in your work, but it's like releasing yourself from that, I think is something that I grapple with. I don't know how you react.
Yes, Ibiye's right, in that my work is very physical, and if I work on a large project, I have a time when either in the middle of the thing or at the end where I'm exhausted, mentally and physically, and that is when I start wondering what the hell I'm doing and why I didn't work with feathers. But there are fallow moments, yes, but you only have to I mean, living in London, I think, really helps because you go out and there's just amazing things all around. You know, shows to go and see. That helps.
Thank you so much. That's a lovely note to end on, a word of encouragement to all the artists in the room and watching online. Hi, everyone. As we mentioned, Sensational Steel is out now. And we'll be around for a sec, so you can come and talk to Sokari to make your order in person if you want to be so lucky. You have some copies here tonight, don't you?
I do, yes.
Thank you. And yeah, wishing you a wonderful evening. Thank you so much for coming. And thank you so much to Sokari and Ibiye. Amazing to speak to you tonight. Thank you.
Hello?
Okay, is it working? Yeah. So, should we try the other one?
Sure, thanks. I mean, I know they're working, it was more just about you.
Okay, I think we're going to start and just kick off because we are super tight on time now. But thank you everyone for coming, and welcome to the last art chat of this evening. I'm joined by two really exceptional artists, and I'm really excited to speak to you both this evening. Shawanda Corbett, who's come straight from 2 performances at the V&A this evening.
Yes.
And Phoebe, Collings-James, who I wanted to mention has a solo exhibition at Arcadia Missa that closes tomorrow, which you shouldn't miss. It's really an incredible show. I'm sure that you're familiar with both of their works, but we want to talk tonight really about the ceramics that you both do, because you're both known for your ceramic works, but work with many other mediums. So sound, film, performance, dance. There's many different facets to what you both do, but at the center of it maybe is clay, is ceramic works. And so I wanted to talk to you both a bit about your process and how it goes with that, and how you incorporate different elements and kind of try to, I guess, create dialogues between static and dynamic, past and present, through that sort of central process of clay. And if I could frame a little bit what I think the connections between the two of you are, I think that you're both in a way working with the body, or bodies, and sort of challenging and transforming and kind of pulling bodies out through history, but to imagine how bodies could be in the future, and sort of to deal with and confront stereotypes we have about bodies, misconceptions, perceptions of what a whole body might be, or what a body can, how we can feel through bodies as well. Do you think that's a fair description of how your works are connected? I mean, how does your process start, Phoebe? Maybe you want to start by talking about that.
I think in terms of bodies, it kind of makes me, I guess I wanted to say no a little bit, but then reel it back and actually just think about maybe just more of a question that is attached to your kind of the connections you're making, and that thinking about actually what a body is, and like thinking about bodies of water, bodies of land, emotional bodies, like thinking about what different membranes they are, permeable membranes, mucous membranes, thinking of like the emotional and nervous systems. And so I guess the flinching from the word body, and especially the body, the idea that there is one type that I might have is because of those other connections, which I imagine you're probably also suggesting, and that I see, that I think we share in our kind of like interest, and the interest in our works. And yeah, those are my first thoughts.
And how does your process then sort of begin with that? Because I also see that you both work a lot with, there's a lot of research that goes into the works, historical research and looking and searching, but I feel that another thing that connects both your works is intuition and emotion, and not trying to be straight with how you articulate bodies or languages or spaces. Do you want to talk a little bit perhaps about how your process begins and how it evolves with the clay specifically?
I guess the process is in a continuum. So this question, it always feels a little bit tricky, because there is maybe a beginning of a process in terms of maybe approaching a project or an exhibition, but it feels quite fluid in that there'll often be things going on with my actual body, internal things, maybe health things, maybe emotional things, as well as how it is as a political entity in the world, and then other people's, my friends, my families, as well as then maybe research, and then just playing around in the studio. So it's usually a kind of like, I guess, a free association between my life, the life of, you know, the society that I'm in, the communities that I'm in, and then research, things that I'm learning, things that I'm reading, intentionally or unintentionally, pieces of information that are coming up against and into my practice. And I guess that is the process, which sounds just like life, but I guess that is kind of it.
At some point it comes out through the clay and it kind of finds a form, I guess. And how does that relate to how you work, Shawanda? Because also, you know, we could say clay is, or ceramics are part of your work and maybe a center around which you create, you know, or position other things. You know, we have film, dance, and you do so many things, you know, you've written scores. I don't know if anyone saw the Art Now at Tate Britain that Shawanda did, Let the Sun Shine In, but that was such a kind of original proposition, I thought, about how to look at and experience ceramic as well, and kind of reanimate them and have this sort of emotional feeling that flows back and forth with the objects. But how does your process usually unfold?
Yeah, I think for me it's more of what the moment calls for, and sometimes there is research involved, but I'm constantly reading. So a lot of the ideas come from silence, and then the music will follow right after that, and that decides what the space would look like. And not necessarily what the work would look like, because everything is made in a moment, and every bag of clay has its own memory. So it's more of a conversation, an ongoing conversation of what it wants to do versus what I want it to do. And there are some that are just wants to be much taller, some wants to be more voluminous, and it is just accepting and letting go, because, you know, of course it does call for some type of technique to get the clay off the wheel head, but all in all, as far as the shapes goes, it's whatever the clay allows me to do without forcing it. And it relies on my memory of people. So it's not necessarily like one particular person, it's just their collective personalities that I see and that I remember. And so it is absolutely about the collective body versus the individual body. And for ceramics, for me, coming from a production potter background, you learn to knock the memory out the clay in order to make it to your liking, and it's kind of undoing that, deconstructing that, and deconstructing what I think what a body is. And that's why the size is kind of like, you can hold it, you want to pick it up, you want to have a conversation with it, you want to see it. And that's why like the size is quite personal versus like something colossal that you can't quite touch, you know. And so it is more about not only how the ceramics fit in the space, but also visualizing how people move throughout the space around the work.
And it was literally sort of a circle that you go around in that project that I mentioned, Let the Sun Shine In. And it's interesting that you create these neighborhoods, right? That you refer to them as neighborhoods. When and why did you decide to start working in that way of creating these kind of installations, I guess, for lack of a better word, of different pieces? Or how do you see them, and why present them or create them in that way?
Yeah, the ceramics, when I think of neighborhoods, I'm thinking about the people that I used to see every day. And it was my own take versus what you see in the media, and especially for Black Americans. And it's quite the same here. There's a stereotype in these poverty places where it's like heavily policed. So they're all quite like aggressive, or lack of empathy or humanity and things like that, because there are certain things that are introduced in these neighborhoods for everyone else to cope. And yeah, it is just like a coping mechanism that turns into an identity and is quite villainized. And so what I wanted to do was to have a different approach, add a different visual vocabulary for them to see and to understand. You know, it might seem quite ugly and disorganized on the media, but like a personal experience, they're quite beautiful, you know, from the candy lady that is in just about every neighborhood that I've lived in, to even, you know, like just the two old men that sits on the porch and talk all day. They gripe, that's all they do. But they're best friends, and you know, and they just watch everybody go by, and they yell down the street, and they want to know how's your mother and them, you know, how they're doing and what they're doing, and it's just a conversation. And so it is like a kind of like a love letter to them, to my memory of them.
And how does that, because I was thinking that, you know, we have neighborhoods, and Phoebe, in your kind of current exhibition, it's almost like you've constructed an army in a way, and using these kind of, you know, the references are different, but there's this also idea of collective presence, I guess. What was the thinking behind the exhibition? How you wanted to present these pieces in a kind of, I guess, a way that surrounds the viewer or makes the visitor interact differently with them and with the space?
Well, the show is called Bun Babylon, a Heretics Anthology. And so the idea is that it's presenting these 6 different characters, these 6 different forms of a preacher, an infidel, a dreamer, a cipher, a silo, and I probably missed one, a guardian. But I think in terms of an idea of a neighborhood and the perception from inside and outside of a neighborhood, the idea of the show is that these characters are in a procession, and that maybe the perception of that procession could shift between a death march, a carnival, a sort of battle march, potentially depending on which side of these figure creatures you might be, these sort of like ideologies or ideas and ideas of perception. You know, one of them's a kind of horse-like figures. There are these more vessel-like, bird, human-like figures which are sort of rolling and feel like they're speaking. There's a rose. The ciphers are kind of cubes. They're kind of maybe impenetrable objects. And so I think, in relation to this idea of kind of how things are perceived, depending on where you are in relation, that kind of speaks
where
to
you're
it.
standing, yeah. I feel like actually physically and emotionally and psychically and everything, it makes you kind of it kind of challenges what you're seeing from where you're standing, you know, literally in place, which then makes you think more about how you're interpreting that, you know, information.
And if it's possible to listen, even if, you know, because there's a perception from the outside, and then there's also the perception, despite every effort to communicate yourself or your place, like whether you can actually be heard or whether you can hear someone else. I think that for me that comes into it a lot. Yeah,
and you almost put in the position of being outside that as well, as when you visit this exhibition, you feel that there's something inside that you can't also necessarily gather or get and be part of, because it's this group thing also. And I wanted to ask you both also about your relationship with your materials, because Phoebe, I know you've spoken previously about your, you know, the way that you use materials, what you choose to use, and also the kind of thinking about sustainability and about how the materials also might affect, in turn, your body when you're working with them. What kind of materials, you know, are you working with, and how, and what's important to you when you're like thinking about these things, about how you might produce the works?
I guess in terms of sustainability, I'm considering the firing process, the use of heat and energy, the use of resources that are being mined, and that people are going through huge human effort to extract, often for little or no money, and that any use of materials, and that even comes into a domestic setting, we all are implicated in it, you know. And so I don't know if it so much comes into the work explicitly in a kind of as a theme as such, but it's present because it's kind of because you're not able to, it's unavoidable. I think it also, although it does kind of, I guess, come into my curiosity in terms of working with oxides, like kind of learning more about the kind of the different materials that I'm using to colour the clay, and even speaking to kind of this idea of the clay having memory and having to just work with it. My studio is semi-exposed because it's made of wood, so there are probably going to be 3 months of the year that I have to be on frost watch, where the whole, you know, I could make whole sculptures that could melt because they contain so much water. It also means that my clay is kept outside and freezes, and so I've opened up bags of clay that are just such a different consistency to how I left them. And I think for me, the deeper I get into working with clay and finding out more about its seasons, depending on how much of a controlled environment I'm in, are things that kind of excite me about working with it as a material, because it seems to speak to the ideas I'm trying to evoke, and ideas about transformation and, kind of connection, I guess.
So how do you kind of deal with those challenges? Like if you find that a bag of clay has been frozen, or if something's like suddenly unusable and you come to the studio to kind of work with it, what do you do?
I take a very deep breath and I get on with it. Yeah. I mean, I don't yesterday morning I came into my studio and opened the kiln and something had exploded. It's so common. I mean, not that common. I do sort of have some grasp of how to dry things out, but like the volatility of working with a material like clay in the studio is something that I think also has kept me kept me with some perspective that it actually doesn't matter. What matters is the kind of is the consciousness, is the connection, is the trying to sort of communicate something. The objects as they exist as, I don't know, that their use value is only kind of what we attribute to it, and that you can just start again. So yeah, that's how I look at it.
And how about you, Shawanda? What's your relationship with your materials? And the results are obviously quite different, and you also using color in a really very different way to Phoebe's work, for example. You can see some of your works. Could you tell us a little about?
So I'm used to mixing the clay myself. So you're using a lot of raw materials that can get inhaled a lot. And so coming from the States into here, buying clay is a common route for me for now. And I used to use oxides, but I switched over to stains and underglazes, mainly because, I use different kilns throughout London and how their electric kilns are set up. And some oxides are actually quite toxic in the firing stage, in the mixing stage. And so it becomes very poisonous to other people. So like chrome oxides is a no-go. Magnesium dioxide causes Alzheimer's if you inhale enough. So I don't use black clay. Black clay has that in there as well. And so it is just understanding what these things could do. And so what I wanted to do is try to be as safe as I possibly can, mainly for other people that are using the space constantly. Because I know if it's for me, I would be like very haphazard using those oxides for sure. For sure, I have done that before. But like, just try to be more considerate for everyone else that are using the space and understand how the ventilation works. Because if it's connected to houses and other buildings, no telling if it's just all moving from one place to another. And so it's just to be, for me, to be considerate of that. So that's where the oxides and the stains come from. The stains and the underglazes, which is quite nice, is a different approach. It is, it has its own consistencies, and dealing with that and what glazes work well with it. And it's just using less organic materials as possible until I actually get a place that supports that. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I think we've got time now for maybe one, possibly two questions. Does anyone have a question for Phoebe, Shawanda, or both of them? Anyone? Oh, yeah, at the back. Thank you.
Hi Phoebe, hi Shawanda, hi Charlotte. I'm curator here at Tate, so I was really eager to bring you into the program, and it's just amazing how you guys have managed to bring such a sense of generosity to the conversation around your respective practices, and just amazing to gain that insight. And I just wanted to ask you about the idea in your work that so often, at least in kind of traditional practice on the African continent, or more specifically West Africa, you could say kind of forms of you could say kind of pottery is so often associated with feminine labor, with female labor, and there is a very kind of gendered history, and I'm sure Charlotte might have touched upon it, but I'm just really curious to know what sense does this idea of a kind of matriarchal knowledge system, or the idea of matriarchy, play in your respective practices, given that often these traditions of making are often handed down generationally, and I'd just like to get a sense of whether there is a generational link, perhaps, to other women in your life.
Thank you, Ose. No, I didn't cover that, so I'm glad you've... We only had 20 minutes, Ose, so we can't start getting into matriarchy. And do you want to answer that?
Yeah. So for like domestic craft, I would say, especially for the women in my family, they do tapestry work, they do glass work historically, but it's all for the home. And so going into craft, especially in the States, it's very, during the time when I was studying, it was very male dominated. And so the idea of a black woman in ceramics, they automatically go to West Africa. And it's very primal. That's their view on it. It's primal. It is something that holds no value. It's something that is in the past. It is something that is you lack knowledge of doing anything else with clay, even though there's a lot more knowledge that they do have. And so, and even within the process of, you know, mixing clay and things like that, it is very white male dominated. I think in academia for sure, when I was studying. And so like, it's just the automatic, you don't know anything in these spaces, and you know, let the man do it. I was like, okay, you want to do the hard way, by all means do it. And so it is going against that, going against what they perceive as, you know, what is acquired of a person's body to do these things, to move about. And so working against that is a constant thing. Even when I came here and work on an anagama kiln firing, they were teaching me how to glaze. I was like, oh, this is fun. So, and when they got through doing what they're doing, and I was just like, okay, now here's an easier way of doing that. So it is, you know, I don't know, it's a constant pushback for me personally. And so when I see other women in ceramics doing their own thing, you know, I get quite excited about that.
That's powerful. Phoebe, do you have anything you want to say?
Yeah, I echo that. I definitely have had those experiences in clay studios and in study. Most of the kind of connections to any kind of craft in my family through women is through textile work, and actually the ceramic connection I have is from the 20s. Like all my uncles, all my great uncles and granddad were working in the Stoke pottery, and they would have been labourers. So they were the sagger glossers and the guys running into like very hot kilns with very expensive china on their heads and dying probably super young. So yeah, I'm definitely, I've found a lot of my inspiration from looking at West African traditions that have been matrilineal. But yeah, the personal ones are white men from the 20s. So that's that.
I think we're getting the sign. So we have to finish there, unfortunately. Thank you so much, Phoebe and Shawanda, for such a beautiful conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thanks for everyone for coming, and have a lovely weekend. Thank you.
Thank you.